Right. Good evening. Oh, no. Come on. Good evening. All right. I know it's cold, it's late, it's getting to Thanksgiving. But, okay. Anyway, I'm Carl Asplund. I'm the Associate Director of the Honors Program. Welcome to the 60-second Honors Colloquium, Education Behind the Curtains. And I'm delighted to tell you that this week we are featuring Dr. Terrell Strayhorn, and we're all looking forward to that. This should be quite interesting and very exciting. Before we get to any details of things, however, a few housekeeping bits would be helpful. Exits in the back and on either side of the stage, bathrooms out front, and please no photos or video recording tonight. And once the sign-in QR code comes up over here, the students please sign in, and then we would ask everyone to kindly shut off and put away their phones. So we can give our full attention to our guest. Oh, there it is. Okay. So we can sign in now. If you do need to leave during the event, please close the door back there very carefully. It makes a lot of noise. And please refrain from speaking until you've left the building. There's a strange dint of acoustics here, where everything that's said out there is actually heard up here. We're sort of like the Vatican that way. Now, an absolutely delightful obligation that we have here every time we do this is to welcome a member of the Narragansett tribe to the stage to join us for the land acknowledgement. Please welcome Silver Moon LaRose to the stage. Thank you for being here. And it is my pleasure to say that the University of Rhode Island occupies the traditional stomping ground of the Narragansett Nation and the Niantic people. We honor and respect the enduring and continuing relationship between the Indigenous people and this land by teaching and learning more about their history and present-day communities, and by becoming stewards of the land that we too inhabit.
Thank you. Asquequasanumis, Colloquium, Colloquium about Kiap Nahagansek. Welcome to Narragansett Lands, everybody. My name is Silver Moon LaRose. I'm a citizen of the Narragansett Nation, an alumni of the University of Rhode Island, and I am the assistant director at Tamaquag Museum, who, fingers crossed, and with your support, will be moving to this campus very soon. Yeah, thank you. We're very excited. I'm excited for parking. So thank you for having us here today to give the land acknowledgement. Every time I give a land acknowledgement, I say something different. I think that's really important, because what can happen if we are just rephrasing the same lines over and over again is people will glaze right over it as they continue to reseat themselves and adjust and get ready because they've already heard that. And then it loses its purpose. It's really meant to be a moment to sit with the thought that colonization and conquest has impacted a community significantly, and that we should be thinking every day about how we can support the continuance of those communities. Next year is the 250th, the semi-quincentennial. That Declaration of Independence being signed to form a new country. And in that declaration, it calls Native people the merciless Indian savages. When we think about the very purpose of that document and how it spoke about Indigenous people, we were never meant to belong. We were never meant to be a part of that. And when I saw tonight's title, Who Gets to Belong, that really sat with me for a minute. And I thought about how are we creating spaces where everyone belongs? And that's what a land acknowledgement should have you thinking about. How do we create a space where a sovereign nation can continue to belong within another sovereign nation? And what can we do to make that possible? So as you sit and you listen tonight and hear about belonging, we should all be sitting, actively listening, and thinking about what we can do. and how we can create change, especially in education. And so I want to say thank you to the University of Rhode Island, who not only created the land acknowledgement, but then created that first step to do actionable change for our communities, creating scholarships for Narragansett students, because for the first time in our history, we have the most Narragansett students on campus that we have ever had. So we see that success already. Thank you to the university for creating spaces of belonging. Thank you for inviting me here tonight, and I offer my blessings on the rest of your lecture tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Silver Moon. Powerful and good thoughts for us all to keep. Now, this colloquium represents and celebrates what the honors program does best, namely engage with major issues of our time at timely moments. And who could have foreseen, perhaps 2 years ago when we started planning this, how timely it would be to be discussing education in our nation right now. And our mission of community building also leads us to be very thrilled to promote the partner events that you've seen rotating up here on the screen. And, that was not where I wanted to go, but there I am. Anyway, we'll let that go. But anyway, producing a series of this scope requires 1 or 2 years of planning, as I mentioned, and many campus partners. I would like to extend thanks especially to the colloquium coordinators, Lazaro Camacho Jr. and Daniel Kelly from the College of Education. I would like to thank the sponsors of this year's program, who are listed in the program. And a special thanks to Provost Wolf and her office, and to President Parlange and his office, both of whom are sustaining sponsors of the URI Honors Colloquium. Now, if you are enjoying the colloquium, and I see many familiar faces here from week to week, please do consider supporting the honors program. Your gift keeps this going, quite literally. And before I step off stage, I would like you to join us in 2 weeks on December the 2nd to hear from a panel of education stakeholders from across the state. They will unpack shifting priorities, policy debates, and systemic challenges, and discuss the state of education in Rhode Island. So, now to introduce tonight's speaker, please welcome aforementioned Lazaro Camacho Jr., colloquium coordinator and assistant professor in the College of Education. Lazaro.
What's good, everyone? Thank you so much for being here. It's my extreme pleasure to be able to introduce our guest for tonight's conversation. He has a relatively long bio, one that is, I think, I take great pleasure in being able to share with you because I think it informs greatly the work that he does in the conversation that we'll have today. And so I'll begin by sharing that Dr. Terrell Strayhorn is a leading authority in the fields of education, psychology, and leadership, internationally known for his groundbreaking research and scholarship on sense of belonging. He's authored over 14 books and more than 200 academic publications and highly regarded peer-reviewed journals and volumes, plus dozens of widely circulated op-eds, letters, and blogs. He is a contributing writer for Entrepreneur, All Business, Thrive Global, and leads the Belonging Matters blog for Psychology Today. Dr. Strayhorn currently serves as a professor of education and psychology at Virginia Union University, where he also works in the office of the provost in the Center for the Study of Historically Black Colleges and Universities as Director of Research, Director of the Center for Transcendent Leadership, and Principal Investigator of the Belonging Matters Lab. He teaches courses, designs curricula, and/or supervises doctoral committees at several universities across the globe. A leading voice with subject matter expertise in data analytics, human-centered design, and strategic planning. Strayhorn earned a bachelor's degree from the University of Virginia, master's in education from UVA, master's in psychology from Indiana Tech, and a doctorate from Virginia Tech. Driven by a genuine passion for helping others, Dr. Strayhorn has dedicated his career to working with individuals from underserved, vulnerable, and system-impacted backgrounds. He is a member of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated and serves on several nonprofit boards, including Rainbow Labs, Career Analysis Organization of America, Oregon Outreach Incorporated, Men Inc., Houston, and Psychologists of Color Incorporated, to name a few. He is co-editor of Belonging Journal, associate editor of the Journal of Minority Achievement, Creativity and Leadership, and specialty chief editor of Frontiers in Education. And in his spare time, he also co-hosts the weekly Do Good Work podcast. Please help me in welcoming our guest speaker today, Dr. Terrell Strayhorn.
Good evening. First, round of applause for that wonderful introduction, please. Appreciate all of that. And I'm really excited about what we're going to be able to accomplish tonight together, and looking forward to having opportunities to both share some thoughts and insights with you, but also to make sure we have some time for Q&A. So what I'm going to do is put this in play, wait for my laptop to realize it's a laptop, and of course, you know that we went over this, right, before all of it, and now my laptop doesn't want to be my friend. There we are. All right. So while that starts to register, let's see. What kind of day did you have? Everybody have a good day? Yes? Good days in the room? That's awesome. And how many of you say, no, I'm ready for this day to end? Anybody ready for this day to go ahead and end? Okay, thank you for your honesty. And so we're going to sort of as my, interesting. You don't want to see all my email. I don't even want to see all my email. So let's try this again. There we are. All right, participate. As was mentioned, I'm Terrell Strayhorn, and I have the fortunate pleasure of serving as interim dean of the School of Education. What is going on? And the interesting thing is my students are watching in the live stream, and so, yeah, I'm sure they're like, what is going on right now? I have no idea. All right, so I think, let me do this. Okay. I don't even know what that means, but it sounds very, very affirming.
You go over there. You go over there. I'll stay over here.
Okay, I appreciate it. Let's try this again.
Let's try it again.
I don't know what time I'm on. Is it third time or fourth time? The good news is I created the slides, so I don't actually have to have them if not. But I have the fortunate pleasure of working in academic leadership at my institution. I serve as an associate provost and the interim dean of the School of Education, professor of education and psychology. Who doesn't like staying there? Education and psychology, as well as the director of research in the Center for the Study of HBCUs. And what I want to do tonight, as was already mentioned, is, it's not PowerPoint actually. It's going to be Keynote. What I want to do tonight is talk a little bit about from my research in a way that sort of connects with the realities of people about this whole theme, who gets to belong, and in a way that I hope will unmask, unveil, and reveal some important insights to life in this country today. And we'll do it in a way that's framed around issues of justice and injustice. We're going to talk about a lot of different concepts. But before I go too far, I do want to say special thanks or recognition to a couple of folks. You've already done it before, but let's celebrate the Honors Colloquium team, to Dr. Camacho and the entire team. Thank you for the opportunity to be here and the invitation to come. And then, as if you couldn't tell, but we got it stabilized now, we did practice in the pre-show about technology, so I certainly want to thank Adam and Anna. Where are they? Just clap for Adam and Anna. And I've met a lot of people over the course of my 2 days here, and so if this is my sort of reintroduction to you, we've met somewhere else, it's good to see you again, although I really can't see you because of that light right now. But if this is my first time meeting you, hello, and let's enjoy our time together this evening. All right, so what I want to do is share some thoughts and insights from research. I'm going to anchor it in data. I'll gloss over it and shape it by theory. I will offer some stories, and then I'll guard our time so that certainly we'll have a time for a few questions. So if you're a person who likes to ask questions, please get a couple in mind so I can get one or two in before we wrap up. And then afterwards, we have a reception, right? So we're going to stick around and let's hang out. So if you are a person who likes to connect with the person who's speaking, or you have questions but you don't want to ask them in large gatherings like this, take out your smart device. I know you got one, because the most recent data from, oh my gosh, you were in class today. Hello, all of you wonderful people. The most recent opinion polls suggest that there are more Americans with a smartphone than a toothbrush. So if you were worried about us not having our priorities in the right place, see, you're wrong. We do. We know that you got to have a smartphone. So take that smartphone out, go to the camera device. You can scan this QR code. It'll give you my digital business card. It will connect you to my LinkedIn. It will connect you on my social media, and I would love to stay in touch with you. I'm going to share a lot of information in a relatively short period of time. I simply cannot go into deep detail about most of it. But if you are a person who, thank you, Markeisha, if you are a person who likes to, sort of think about issues later, I use social media as my global whiteboard of sorts, where I'm teaching the world and connecting with folks around thoughts about belonging. I rarely post my favorite outfit because I don't have one. I don't use it for posting my favorite food because my food is pretty boring. But if you are a person who likes to share, read, blog, look at reels, then please connect with me on social media. All right. My message tonight is quite simple, and that is that belonging matters. Now, in a moment, you'll have a lot more information about why belonging matters and how does it matter, especially in educational and learning spaces. But suffice it to say that belonging is an important dimension of human functioning. And because of this is sort of informed by my work in education, but also it drives my research and scholarship in psychology. And since I sit across those two fields, I write a blog for Psychology Today, where I use, sort of accessible everyday language to help people understand that belonging is a feeling. You're going to hear me say that 1,000 times tonight. Maybe not 1,000, but a couple, right? It is a feeling, but it's more than a feeling. It's a feeling that starts to drive and change our mind. Thoughts, patterns, cognitive bandwidth, what we have available to process information, all of that is connected. And there are biological, and medical research confirms this, biological sort of benefits to sense of belonging. So I write about that a lot more in Psychology Today than I do in some of my education pieces. So if you're interested in that, then I invite you to connect with that blog as well. Now, everyone take out your phone. I know it's really dark in here. So actually, we'll do this at the reception. When we are done, let's get together. Let's take pictures, selfies, groupies. I'm here for all of it. And then when you do it, though, let's be sure to tag the University of Rhode Island in our pictures. The reason why I do this, usually when the lighting is bright, you could do it right now. But I do it because, listen, someone was just laughing, right? And I've had people take pictures at my lectures and at conferences. And then people are like, oh my gosh, what concert are you at? Because we often associate laughter and joy and a lot of people having fun together with concerts and cookouts. But it turns out it can even happen on a college campus, during a nightly lecture, at a conference, a professional development workshop. And so this is just starting to push and change the narrative about what these experiences look like. Now let's get into the heart of what I really want to share. That is, one, we teach in, work in, live in, study in an industry, a field called higher education. In higher education, remember when it used to look like this, where students sat under trees and it's not too cold to do so, and they read the books? Or they wrote their own papers and it wasn't ChatGPT. It was like back in the good old days where these things happen, right? Higher education. Higher education is an interesting kind of enterprise in the US because it is qualitatively different from higher education in other countries. Just this last summer, I was invited by the University of the Gambia to come and give a lecture and spend some time there. The University of Gambia only has one public university. It has one for-profit institution. So 2 places for higher education in an entire country. I was just a few weeks ago in New Zealand, and New Zealand's higher education system is different and structured differently. You know, there are some points of connections to ours, but what we have to appreciate is that in this country, we have a system that is comprised of 4,300 colleges and universities. Half of those almost are 2-year community colleges, which play an important role for preparation and training of students who might come to the University of Rhode Island. There are also institutions that have sort of mission-specific kinds of identities. Tribal colleges. We have 107 is probably what the slide, not probably, I know it says that. 107 is what the slide says. But actually, today there are 101 historically black colleges and universities because there are 6 that sort of tinker on the brink of open and closure. They're relatively small, enrolled, financially strapped kinds of places that, you know, just are struggling to compete, but yet provided education to individuals who, in this country, at one point in time, by law, could not be educated, right? So who gets to belong has to appreciate this history that, as I often say at places like University of Rhode Island, I'm really, really excited to be here. I've had a great time. Can't wait to get to the reception. But regardless, we have to appreciate the fact that just a couple decades ago, one, I couldn't have been a student here. I certainly could not have been a professor here, and I wouldn't have been your speaker. So that's to celebrate and acknowledge the fact that we have come and made progress in this country a long way. But secondly, is to also appreciate that while I get to be here, I know that we have a history in higher education of excluding folks, consciously and unconsciously, intentionally and unintentionally. So we have to be often thinking about this question of who gets to belong, who's here, who's represented, who's not represented. Now, our institutions are diverse, but so too are our students. And we have new majority students in higher education that are, increasingly more visible. About 1/3 of students in the U.S. identify as first generation. I've said this a couple times in different settings. First generation is a term that researchers like myself were trained to define as a student who is first in their family to either go to college or first in their family to graduate from college. And this served me well for several years of my career until I started studying and had the fortunate opportunity to learn from foster youth, who would often say to me in interviews, Dr. Strayhorn, I'm confused. First generation is defined as, am I first in my family to go to college? Which family? And they would help me think about the fact that they might have had 2 or 3 foster families, 1 adopted family, by the way, a biological family they may know very little about. Which one determines if they're first generation? This is more than semantics, friends. This is an important question because the answer to it provides access to resources, grants and scholarships, programs and study aways and study abroad, and counselors and advisors, all sorts of things, the goody stuff that we know they need in order to be successful. The reason why that deserves a moment of pause is if that is true for first generation students, and we missed it. I mean, if you go any higher education conference in the world and ask this question, you're gonna stump people and they're gonna have to think about it, right? Well, then maybe it's possible that these terms like first generation that masquerade like they're objective, they seem so firm and they serve as well. Maybe there are other terms that are just as flimsy and slippery depending on who you're asking in what context and what time, which is why we always have that. That's why I didn't title the talk with the period. I put it with the question mark. I hope if nothing else you leave tonight with a lot of questions like who gets to belong and who doesn't, and who decides, when and where, under what conditions, and what can we do about it. Now, here's what's interesting about higher education. We got 4,300 colleges and universities. We got about 20 million students. That makes us a pretty massive enterprise. And interestingly enough, though, I don't know if Dean Danielle is here, but the Dean of the College of Education I met today, and I've met several other associate deans during my visit. For those of us who are academic leaders, there's this interesting thing that happens. Although we're a really large and mass kind of enterprise and system, we are like devoted and committed to this philosophy called student-centered, student-focused, where we don't handle students like our colleagues in the automotive industry handle parts to build a car. We are not comfortable saying, we're not looking at you as individuals. You're a group of people. We just got to process you and graduate you in 4 years. No, we want, despite 17,000, 19,000 students, we want every single student to have that customized, unique experience. As you know, if you go to a conference in higher education, whether it's student affairs or academic affairs, Dr. Camacho can back me up here. People are often talking about high-touch environments. How do you have high-touch environments for 19,000 students? Well, we're working on it. We're trying to figure it out. We're committed to it. And why? Because we know that high-touch, customized, student-centered, student-focused, student-driven kinds of environments are the ones that produce the outcomes we desire. Now then, this is not student-focused, by the way. Just staring at them, it's awkward. Student-focused is much more like this, where we're trying to build environments and experiences that are tailored to the unique interest of students. That no matter the size of the incoming class, we're trying to build an experience where they feel like they're an individual. Someone knows me. Someone's in my corner. That I get courses that align with my interests and my aspirations. And because we are, there's a level of commercialization to this. In other words, people pay for their education. There are students have expectations that maybe the class that I want is offered during the hour where I want it. That maybe, like I've had to work with my own faculty about this, and that is that maybe the class that I want, especially since I'm a student who has to work, I don't choose to work, I have to work to go to school, that maybe this class is available in a modality that fits my life. So, my grandmother, when she was alive, she would say things like, honey, when you go to college, you got to just wrap your whole life around college. Those days are pretty much over. Students are looking for an experience that wraps itself around their lives. So part of what we got to understand is, who are students? What are their lives? And how do we then create this customized, individual, high-touch, relevant, flexible, malleable kind of experience that makes them feel like they matter, they belong, they have what they need in order to be successful there? At the heart of everything I'm talking about tonight is student success. I've never met a single student, whether in Gambia, whether in Italy, whether in New Zealand, whether in South Africa, anywhere, who says, hey, you know what, Dr. Strayhorn, I finished school, I'm going to college, and you know why I'm doing it? Because I want to fail. No one says that. Every single student I've ever interviewed and surveyed over the course of my career says they want to be successful, says they want to get good grades, says they want to graduate. If this were a room full of faculty, whether you're full-time, part-time, adjunct, contract, I would say this: even the student who doesn't come to class regularly wants to pass. The student who never speaks up wants to get a good grade. The student who never asks a question, even though they are lost, wants to get a good grade, wants support, wants help. So the question becomes, how do we create campus environments, classroom environments, laboratories where students can't get lost in the cracks, where we create spaces where students can ask questions and not feel judged as being silly or being stupid, that students can come early or stay later and, one, get the kind of support and assistance that they need, that students who process information differently can have extra time to work on the exam or receive the notes in advance in order to be prepared for the lecture for the day. All of those, we call them accommodations, which are, one, the law, but two, they're also just part of an ecosystem of support that students need in order to be successful. Here's another takeaway. Everyone needs assistance. Everyone needs help. We just differ in the kind of help that we need. So as you think about it, student success has been theorized and explained a lot over the course of time, especially in the US. This is a traditional student success model. It says that student success is a function of a lot of different factors. One of which is, and we talked about it today in the honors colloquium, background traits. Like students who go to schools where they're exposed to graphing calculators and advanced coursework, and they're expected to write multiple page papers, are prepared differently for college than students who don't have those experiences. Okay, that's a mouthful, but remember, what prepared the student for college is the experience, the opportunity to learn how to write a 5-page paper, the opportunity to learn how to use a graphing calculator, the opportunity to learn in classrooms where they had to show their work. Another student who had similar opportunities might be just as prepared for college by the time they get to the University of Rhode Island. What we've got to admit is, though we live in a democratic society, not all opportunities are equal. Some students go to schools. I used to teach in one, a Title I public school in sort of inner city DC, Maryland, where I was a music teacher. And when I walked into my music classroom, I was so excited. I was ready to teach music. I was looking for all the instruments, and I found none, because I worked in a school that didn't have resources to have all the instruments. There was like a piano maybe, but it was out of tune. Hard to teach on that. So I had to work with my principal to sort of acquire the instruments. Here's the other thing. I had to teach in ways that activated the imagination of my students so they could imagine certain instruments. I had to expose them to those instruments on screen because I could not afford in this school district to give them the instruments in hand. While just down the road was another school where there are 32 xylophones for students to play on. Multiple keyboard, a classroom full of keyboards, just differences in opportunities, but those opportunities create different advantages and disadvantages that determine who gets to belong. All right, so in this model, one of the things that's often talked about is this idea of commitment. So background, schooling, prior schooling, all of that really does matter. But so too do your commitments. And you've probably met folks like that. And for students who are in the audience, you can think about yourself. When you came to the University of Rhode Island, if you were really excited about the goal of earning a college degree, like I'm not sure I like Rhode Island, I'm not sure I like URI just yet, but I'm absolutely sure I'm going to get a college degree, theorists would say you were very strong or high in goal commitment. If you came here like, well, I mean, I want to get my degree, but I'm not going to get my degree just from any old place. I'm getting it from URI. I love this place. My mom went here, my dad went here, my dog went here, my cat went here, everybody went here. If you're that kind, your theorists would say you're high in institutional commitment. What they also theorize is after you have some experiences in college, you will reconsider these commitments. And ultimately, those who are high in goal commitment toward the end of college and high in institutional commitment are more likely to be successful. Now, you can also balance those out, but those who are low in goal commitment, like I'm not really sure I need this degree because I have other kinds of ways to make money or other kinds of ways to make a living, and I'm really not excited about the place, are far more likely to drop out. So for those of us who are trying to intervene, increase student success, raise our retention rates, we should be paying attention to and measuring students' commitment to the place as well as the goal. Academic advisors, I said this a few years ago at the NACADA, National Academic Advising Association. That's the work of an advisor, to have those kinds of conversations and check-ins with students to see, what should we talk about today? One, how are you doing? How are you doing in your class? How are you feeling about URI? Well, so this goal of getting this degree, where does it fit into life? What do you want to do when you're done? It's okay when you come in the door to not know. It should be a point of intervention if we have a student who's a junior or about to be a senior who still doesn't know. Maybe even a sophomore toward the end of that year. That at some point there should be some clarification of the commitment to the goal. It tracks on to student success. Also, we know this, that is, if we think about commitments, not only do students revisit them, but there's this whole thing that happens that's about who you are. Your prior schooling, your background, all of that shapes who you are. And then you get into college and we have this thing called academic and social integration. It really is what you do. You get involved in clubs and organizations. You take courses in labs. You make friends. You break up. You find a new partner. Whatever happens, there's a lot of connections that happen in the academic and the social domain. And what theorists have helped us understand is that there's a relationship, actually, don't know why that keeps doing that, that's fun. There's a relationship between who you are and what you do. But interestingly enough, they stop there and they start thinking it is very linear. But how many of you know that like who you are does drive what you do? So I went to the University of Virginia. I grew up in a family of 5, and my grandmother, my mom's mom, was a powerful influence on my life. My grandmother was a choir director, so I sang in her choir. When I started playing the piano, I started playing and directing for choir. So by the time I go to UVA, I am already prone to be involved in choir. And I am. I'm the director, I'm the musician, but being involved in choir also shapes who I become, because now I came into college as a pre-med bio major, then I switched to organic chemistry, then I switched to math, because I was just all over the place. And I eventually settled on music and religious studies, because my involvement, my integration shaped my becoming. So this idea that this is somehow linear and that it always goes in one direction is just false. Here's the other question, pop quiz. Where does finances fit in this model? Because it costs to go to college. Whether you're at URI or VUU, it costs. There's a tuition. And there are hidden costs of going to college. I've tell the story often of a student who goes off to college. She's spending money left and right. $7 here today, $17 the next day, $34 the next day. I'm connected to this kid, so I call her up. I'm like, hey, what in the world are you doing? You're going to break the bank? Why in the world are you spending so much money? And she says to me, Dad, belonging costs. And I said, what do you mean? And she said, it costs to have friends. And she's telling me about how, like, when she goes out with her friends, sometimes they want to, like, eat pizza. And one day, her friend Marissa will pay the bill. The next day, she's expecting Aaliyah to pay the bill. What kid wants to say, I can't do it? Because everybody wants to be included, accepted, respected, and mattered. So, that's why I think things like what I've watched while I've been here, where we have receptions. Last night we were in the visitor center. We had pizza for students. Anytime we can bring people together and provide food, you're meeting a lot of basic needs. You have no idea, like, who's hungry, who's it's been some time since their last meal. That those are fundamental needs that really have to be met. But here's what I know, is while this model was popular and it produced a lot of research, it's just unfortunately not that useful today. Partly because students don't live in boxes like that. In fact, most of the students that I've studied now, because I've focused on those who are forced to the margin, have an experience with boxes. My LGBTQIA2S plus students in my studies would say things like boxes can be terrifying and limiting and rigid, and they see themselves as coming out of a box. Some call it a closet, never to be put back in. So it's oppressive, the box. I've studied justice-involved youth who are afraid of marking the box, that they have a history or contact with the justice system because that box has denied them access to jobs and internships and co-ops and all sorts of experiences. That I've studied foster youth and homeless youth who had to live out of a box and came to college not just to get an education, not just to make friends, but to, one, be sure that they feel a sense of belonging, can be successful here so that they would never have to experience that again or anyone else in their family line. So then it's really interesting to me that we take these students who are so full of life and 3D, 4D kinds of experiences and then use these limiting theoretical frameworks to force them into boxes. And any theoretical framework or perspective that requires a student to play small to fit into a box, to me, is inadequate. What we've needed for a long time are models that pay attention to the factors and not so much focus on the boxes. Students are successful in college for a lot of different reasons. Academic, financial, social kinds of factors. Here's what I know is that in order to have the conversation we had to have about belonging, we've got to cross across the bridge of some terms. One is, this is no surprise to you, students are different. Everybody is not the same. I tell people I'm the fun size. But though I'm the fun size, my cousin is the full size. There are students who have all the money in the world to pay out of pocket for the University of Rhode Island. And then there are others like myself who have had to borrow their entire life from family members and the government everywhere in order to pay for their education. While that's true, there are multiple ways in which we are different. We are certainly different in our identities. We are certainly different, but also structurally, we are different in terms of our access to opportunities. My mom and dad, my dad just passed in April of this year, but my mom, if she were here, she would tell you this story of how when she married my dad, he promised her that he would buy her a house at some point. So they get married, they have my older brother, and then at some point my mom tells her husband, hey, about that house, when are we going to work on that? And my dad said, oh, yeah, I'm going to get you a house. And so they go and they search for 27 different houses. And they get tired. And so at some point in the middle of searching for homes, there's a random Saturday, they stopped at this corner store to get coffee, right? So they're in the corner store to get coffee. They walk out the corner store. They look across the street, and my dad says, well, what about that house? Is that on our list? My mom said, no, I've never even seen that house. I kind of like it. Let's go check it out. That becomes the house in which I'm born. That's how random some of this is, but because of that decision to buy that house, to inquire about that house, to stop at that corner store and get the coffee there, not down the road, I was tracked to going to award-winning elementary schools, middle schools, high schools, such that I told the story earlier. By the time I go to high school, I'm doing well not because I'm necessarily academically oriented. I'm doing well because my friends are doing well. And that's what's celebrated in our peer group. That those currents, those forces, that arbitrary decision set me up for a lifetime of advantages and opportunities that ultimately brings me to the University of Rhode Island to be your speaker tonight. Had my mom and dad chosen another house, I might not be your speaker. I may have never written a book. I may have never had a teacher or a professor who told me I could write a book. And that's why this who gets to belong is a justice principle, because it shouldn't be that arbitrary. We should have a system of schools where every kid has access to teachers who are qualified, who are teaching in their field, in classrooms and schools that are well acquainted with the resources for the student to learn and to grow and to thrive and to imagine. So students are different, and we also know this, that what I said earlier, everybody needs support, everybody needs help, but here's what you got to know is that we differ in one, the type of help and assistance we need. Secondly, we differ in the amount of help that we need and when we need it. And if we give everybody the same kind of assistance, the same kind of help, like right now, I'm feeling good. I need no energy at all. But if you give me energy, I'm going to be bouncing off the roof tonight. But there's some people in here who probably need an energy shot, a little energy boost. You've had a long day. I'm keeping your attention, but you're struggling. Right? So you got to pay attention to who people are and what they need, which is why assessment, evaluation, and data is so central to the conversation around belonging and student success. What we know is this, that when you give students what they need, not what everybody else has, but what they need, they can thrive. As shown on the screen, when giving them, fun-sized people like myself in this purple shirt, you give them the same kind of support, they still can't see over the wall. But if you take into account who they are, their strengths, their talents, their deficits, their gaps, but also their assets, and you provide the kind of support that they need, look at them. They can become happy. They can participate in the game of life. They can see over the wall just like others. But in higher education, rarely are we giving students wooden boxes. Those wooden boxes are metaphors. Metaphors for the kind of support that we provide. And that some students need counseling and some students need a clothing closet. That some students need financial aid and some students need tutoring. That some students need extra time on the exam and some students just need an extra hand. And the problem is when you start just giving students the exact same things, you're tapping into areas that they don't have need of, or you're providing support that gets wasted. But when we take into account who students are and appreciate the fact that they are differently abled, and that's not for a particular population, that's true of all of us. Let me tell you, I'm able to give this talk tonight. I mean, if I forgot my next slide, I promise you I could do that. Now, what I cannot do is I cannot play football. I can watch it, but I am definitely not abled when it comes to football. We all have strengths and assets and talents, and we find success in life through those. But we also have to appreciate this, that even when we can appreciate that there are certain supports and assistance and usually a constellation of supports that a student needs in order to be successful, we can't lose sight that there's still this thing called the wall that separates them from full participation in the experience. Those walls are also metaphors for philosophies and mindsets, heterosexism and homophobia that shape people's opportunity to learn, people's opportunity to excel. They're process walls like deadlines. I remember when I was vice president for academic and student affairs at Lemoyne-Owen College in Memphis, Tennessee, I was heading home, getting ready to get in my car. A student came rushing over to me. He's like, oh my gosh, he was crying his eyeballs out. He said, Dr. Strayhorn, I'm so glad I caught you. And I was thinking to myself, I'm so not glad you caught me, but that's okay. What's up? And he said, I need some help. And I said, well, what do you need help with? And he said, well, I missed the deadline for the freshman trip. I said, okay. I didn't even know we had a freshman trip, but okay. You got a freshman trip and you missed the deadline. He said, yeah, I missed the deadline for applying. And I'm really worried because if I don't go on the freshman trip, does that mean I'm not a freshman anymore? As I got to reach in to help him with the situation, I realized he's first generation. And if you're first in your family to go to college, how do you know that if you don't go on the freshman trip, you're no longer a freshman? How do you know you're not going to be branded in some way? We're going to be talking about like all the freshmen who didn't go to the trip, come on this side of the room. You know, these kinds of things swirl around in your mind. And they start to erode your confidence as you move and navigate through the space. So we have to appreciate the fact that those walls have to be removed so we can create liberating learning environments for all of our students to thrive. And as we do that, it points out some of our work that must be done. The work that we get to do, can be organized in sort of two buckets. One is there's constructive work. That is, we get to build some new things for students to be successful, while we also remove some of the barriers that get in their way. It was going too good. It's fine. What just happened? As we think about this, however, student success is powerfully connected to a concept that I've been writing about for some time, and that is sense of belonging. Now we're going to do this thing again, probably. Now, here's what you have to know about belonging, and then I'll stop. Belonging is a feeling. It is a psychological concept that has all sorts of benefits to it, one of which is, yes. In this piece that's really pointing to this book, I write about belonging as a feeling. It's a shared faith. People want to belong. By a show of hands, how many of you in here want at least one friend sometime in life? All right, even with the lights off, I can see a lot of hands up. Most people want to be connected. They want to feel like they matter. They want to feel like they belong. What I've learned is it's also a shared faith. This belief that I've got needs. I have needs for affiliation, needs for support, needs for safety and security. And my needs are going to be met by my decision to be a part of this group. It's what compels students to come to places like the University of Rhode Island. I was in Atlanta, Georgia, collecting data from a test site there, and a student said something to me that was just really powerful for anyone who works in enrollment management, admissions in those areas. The student said to me, or I asked the student, why did you come to your university? And they said, I came to my university because they want me here. I said, how do you know your university wants you here? And they said, well, because they admitted me. Why would you admit someone that you don't want? Right? So then I started asking more additional questions, and as I started exploring this relationship between want and admit, I asked the student, so what's been most significant to you, most powerful for you as a student at the school? And the student said, it's the fact that I'm accepted. I said, how do you know you're accepted? Again, they admitted me. Why would you admit someone you don't accept? So here's the interesting thing. We offer students admission letters, but what the student receives is acceptance. We have to appreciate the fact that if we think about this from a sort of opportunity perspective, there are students walking around who have always wanted to be accepted. I write about in my books students who, in the foster system who feel like they were given up at birth, who just want someone to accept them, and the University of Rhode Island does it. For students who didn't get selected for the group or the team in high school, who didn't get accepted for the scholarship when they applied, but then they get the admission letter from the University of Rhode Island, and before you know it, it's like this feeling of we all want it. And that feeling is powerful if it goes someplace. Here's what we got to understand. Most people don't start with belonging in place. We start from a place of belonging uncertainty. I'm not real sure if I belong here. We start looking for messages and cues. Those messages and cues can be everywhere, like on shirts. That's why a lot of institutions, as part of their belonging strategy, put them there. Sometimes you can be walking across a campus wondering, do I belong here? Did I make the right decision? Is anybody else here like me? Do other people feel lonely? It's cold. It's getting dark earlier. What's going on? And as you swirl with those questions, you might be able to look up at a building, and the building might tell you, you belong here. So it's on a sticker at William & Mary. It's on a purple and white sign at Washington State University. It's a blue and white notebook at the University of Kentucky. I could keep going, but I won't. It's everywhere belonging is. But I was at Vanderbilt University in Nashville, Tennessee, when a student also reminded me that sometimes you're looking for a cue, a message that people like you belong here at the front of the room. You want to see it reflected in the faculty. You want to see it in the curriculum. You want to see it in the video, which has huge implications for structural steps that we can take to make sure that students feel like their interests matter and are connected to the institution. Psychologically, we know this, that sense of belonging is the experience of personal involvement. It is also the integration of the person within the system. Said differently, people feel a sense of belonging when they have certain thoughts, certain feelings, and certain behaviors. Now, if I had forever to talk about this, I would show you that one of the things that we do when we feel a sense of belonging is we look at language. So people have all sorts of thoughts during the day. But one thing that happens for people who feel a sense of belonging is they use certain words that demonstrate or signal, I feel like I matter here. I feel like I'm a part of this. They're possessive kinds of words. You are not the professor, you're my professor. This is not a campus, this is my campus. This is not a club, this is our club. Inclusive, possessive language starts to cue up and reflect belonging. When people say things like, this is a building, this is your class, just tell me what I got to do to get an A in your class, that dissociative language reflects a sense of alienation, the opposite of belonging. All right, and as I think about this, I said earlier that students walk around with all sorts of questions in their mind, like, will I make friends? Will I be judged as smart? Will I be included or excluded? And what they're looking for are opportunities from the institution that intervene and answer those questions for them. We answer questions in a lot of different ways. One of the ways we do it, and I write about it in this piece, is through three concepts, and then I'll stop. One is reciprocal visibility. Students want to feel a sense of belonging. They want to know that other people, they matter to other people and that other people matter to them. They want to be seen, but I'm seen by others. So this reciprocal visibility shows up in a powerful way that also relates to what I call relational consistency. It's not the fact that I have a professor who I know. I have a professor who I know and I get to know over a period of time. It's not just a staff member who comes to my track meet once and never again do we connect, but it's someone who, through this sort of relatability and dependability, starts to communicate to me, there's someone who I can depend on, who's in my corner. It's the professor who knows my name, who offers constructive feedback, and often greets me at the door. That kind of consistent connection is what we call relational consistency, and it makes a difference. People want to feel relational consistency whether they're studying in person or online. Interestingly enough, even online, we want to be together. We want to experience community. But just like in person, that has its limits. Because pretty soon, that kind of fun, smiley, cheery community gives way to resignation, being checked out, where people turn off their cameras, change their names to communicate to people how they feel about an experience. As I think about this, Oh dear. As I think about this, I think about a couple things. One is, come on, that, as I said earlier, we have to appreciate the fact that yes, people want to belong. Yes, belonging matters. Yes, it makes a difference, but everyone's got a history with belonging. And in fact, when we ask the question of who gets to belong, that in this country, there are people whose opportunity to belong and opportunities to learn have been structured by systems in history. Doors shut in their face, opportunities that were denied them. These things matter in the course of human events. As we think about it, what I know is this: sense of belonging, when it's in place, produces positive outcomes. Students who feel a sense of belonging get better grades, they go to class, they're retained at higher rates, they earn better grades, they're less likely to be placed on academic probation, and more likely to be nominated or recommended for academic awards. They graduate even on time, and upon graduation become generous and engaged alumni. Now then, you may ask, well, how in the world do we get there? How do we make sure that we feel this sense of belonging? I would say it this way: it takes a village of people to make sure that people feel a sense of belonging. The constructive and destructive work that I talked about is really left up to faculty, staff, peers, in the ways that I've discussed. But one of the most powerful concepts I'm trying to draw on now is this idea of narrative alignment. Students feel a sense of belonging when their story about themselves aligns with the story of the institution. When their story and their values and their interests align with aspects of the institution. When I think about story, I think about the beautiful woman who's on the screen. This is my maternal grandmother, my mom's mom, who helped raise me, Creola Evelyn Warner. Never called her that. I called her Ma. Ma was a public school teacher for 55 years in Trenton, North Carolina, which is pretty impressive because you can't even get people to be teachers for 55 minutes nowadays. But my grandma did it for 55 years. She retired on a Friday, went to church on Sunday, and by Monday, she was thinking to herself, what will I do with my time? She went right on back to her school as a substitute teacher until death. My grandmother never taught me in classrooms formally, but she taught me throughout life in places like this. Pop quiz. You know what this is? Piggly Wiggly, little grocery store. My grandma would go into Piggly Wiggly with a cart, and she would get some milk and some bacon and some eggs, and she would get whatever she needed. But my grandma always, she's like me in a corner store. My grandma takes forever to get out of Piggly Wiggly because she's only going to get 3 items, but she got to speak to everybody. Because she gets in there, they're like, oh my gosh, Miss Warner. And my grandma says, baby, do you know me? And they say, yes, Miss Warner, my name is Stephanie White. You were my 4th grade teacher. Now, Stephanie's in her 50s by now, but still she remembers her 4th grade teacher. You go down the other aisle and someone says, hey, Miss Warner, it's good to see you. Baby, do you know me? Yeah, my name is Jeff. Miss Warner, you're my 4th grade teacher. Everywhere we went. So I sit there watching my grandma, just having a conversation with people who were apparently, she was their 4th grade teacher, and she would be getting stuff in her cart, and then she would go to the front finally to check out. I'll never forget it. The manager of the store, his name was Greg. And my grandma would get her groceries, and Greg had one of those loud cash registers where you hit it, and it's like all that stuff. So he would calculate my grandma's stuff, and he'd say, Miss Warner, your grand total today is $0.00. Every time I went to Piggly Wiggly, my grandma never paid for it. So much so that I thought stuff was free at Piggly Wiggly. As I got older, I realized actually Piggly Wiggly does have prices. My grandma just never had to pay them. I will never forget when after my grandma passes, I write a book chapter about her. How a teacher in the South kind of taught a generation with limited resources. To do it, I went to Trenton, North Carolina and did life history interviews with people like Greg, the manager of the store. I walked up to Mr. Greg and I said, hey, Mr. Greg, I got a question. Or I sat down with him and I said, I got a question. Growing up, you never charged my grandma for her groceries, so much so that I thought Piggly Wiggly was free. He said, no, we've got groceries. He said, but you didn't know, your grandma was my 4th grade teacher. I said, she was everybody's 4th grade teacher. He said, and everything I learned about running this store, I learned from your grandma in 4th grade. I said, do you mean how to count? He said, yeah, I did learn that. But I also learned from your grandma how to be nice, how to say hi to people, even when they don't say hi back. Like, several students that I met with today, we were talking about in the class, Chloe and others, that my grandmother taught Greg how to pause, how to listen actively, even when you're trying to get your groceries. He said, all those things have kept this store running, and I learned all that from your grandma in 4th grade. My grandma took me other places like this, BB&T Bank. In fact, I had an account at BB&T Bank, not because it was convenient, but because that's where I wanted to go. We go into the bank. If you go to Trenton, North Carolina, and go into BB&T Bank, on the wall there's this tapestry that says, love many, trust few, learn to paddle your own canoe, Creola Evelyn Warner. It's in that bank not because my grandma had a whole lot of money, but because the managers in that store, my grandma taught them in 4th grade. And she left them with these kinds of lessons. My final lesson from my grandmother I learned not in a bank and not in a store, but in a hospital, Craven County Community Hospital. I got the call that no grandkid ever wants to get, and that is that at 88 years old, my grandma, the master teacher, had suffered an aneurysm and consequently was immobilized and sort of sitting there in the hospital, and they didn't want to operate because they didn't think she could handle it. So I got on a plane and went to North Carolina and walked into the room. Whenever I was around my grandmother came alive. But this particular day, I remember walking into the door of this room, and I said to my grandmother, "Hey, Ma!" And the woman in the bed said nothing, looked at me and turned and looked out the window, so I knew then we were already starting to lose my grandma. I walked over to my mom, who's an only child, who's watching her mom at her final hours, and I put my arms around my mom, and my mom just breaks down crying. Have you ever found someone who's right on the verge of tears, and your touch, your hug, just is enough for them to let it go? That's the sensation, vibration, sometimes, of belonging. I told my mom, you got to go home and rest, and I'll take care of my grandma. She said, you can't take care of your grandma. My mom's a public health nurse. She said, because you're not a nurse. I said, no, I'm a doctor. So the doctor sent the nurse home. And what I did for the next couple of days, friends, I took care of my grandmother. I cleaned up her messes. I washed her hair. I brushed her teeth. At some point, my grandma was starting to get further and further away from us. I remember the nurse came in, and she was feeding my grandma applesauce. That's all she could hold down. And my grandma was starting to close her mouth and turn her head because she didn't want the applesauce. And I told the nurse, she's never going to let you give her that applesauce because she doesn't know you. She's afraid. And the nurse said, well, do you want to try? I said, actually, I do want to try. And so I took the applesauce that the nurse had been trying to use, and Dr. Camacho, I took a big goop of the applesauce, I put it to my grandma's mouth, and she opened her mouth because when people know you, they try. Not just grandmas in hospital, kids in schools, and students in classrooms and laboratories. That the relationship is what builds the connection and the trust that causes us to try, to engage. And I was feeding my grandma some applesauce. She was doing pretty well, but at some point, the applesauce started falling down her mouth. She was a woman of class and grace, so she was embarrassed, and I could tell she was overwhelmed. And so what I decided to do, because my grandma had applesauce all over her face, was I got another little cup of applesauce, and I threw it all over my face. And I said, girl, that's what we do with applesauce these days. Because if we're going to create spaces of belonging, we're going to make mistakes. We're going to use the wrong word. We may use the wrong pronoun, but we can't let each other just sit there in the mistake. It's so isolating. It's so terrifying. We gotta let people know we all make mistakes, but together we can make sense. And that night, I drifted off to sleep with a chair next to my grandma's bed, and I was holding my grandma's hand and drifted off to sleep, and I was awakened by the most violent shaking of my grandma's hand. I looked at the clock said 1:17 a.m. I looked at my grandma, who had not talked in a week, and she said, hey, Rail. I thought, oh my gosh, my grandma's coming back. She said, baby, it's time for choir rehearsal. I had not heard her say that in a long time. She said, I want you to sing my favorite song. And what I did while holding my grandma's hand is did exactly what she asked me to do, because with relationship comes the opportunity to perform. With relationship comes success. It's because I'm holding the hands of someone who I know. My grandma says, baby, sing your favorite song without delay. I said, this little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine, let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. And when I opened my eyes, I thought my grandma would be come back to life, and what I realized, friend, is my grandma took her last breath doing what she's always done. Years ago, I would have said, as a choir director, my grandma left directing a choir of one. But I was flipping through the Latin dictionary one day, and I came across the word education. In Latin, it's educare, and it means to draw out the light that is within. I came to tell you in my final moments at the University of Rhode Island that we in higher education get the fortunate pleasure of doing this kind of work, that we can create conditions and spaces for every single student to feel a sense of belonging, not just to feel it, but to feel it in a way that transports them from the place of impossibility to possibility and great success. And I have a secret for you. On your darkest day, you are some student's brightest light. Thank you.
Dr. Strayhorn, thank you so much for that wonderfully engaging and mesmerizing opportunity to engage with you, the memories of your grandmother, and the work that you've been doing. We could be here all night having conversations around this topic and engaging in questions. Sadly, given the time, some of the time limitations we do have time for 2 quick questions. And whoever wants to ask a question has to be committed to the relationship to perform, as Dr. Strayhorn has said, within the limitations of the time. So certainly if you're still thinking about everything that Dr. Strayhorn has shared and you're not in a space to ask that question yet, that's completely okay. However, if you do have a question or a thought that's percolating, I would love to chat with you about it if you have one. We have questions? We're going back here.
Hi, my name is Gianna, and I was just wondering, obviously, like, there's so many valuable things you said, but if there's just one thing that you want us to take away and remember as we leave, what would you say it should be?
Yes, thank you for your question. I would say one thing that I would hope that we take away from this is, look, belonging matters. It's a feeling. It produces positive outcomes. There's a lot of research that supports that. I think what I'm most concerned about, though, is that if we've done anything, we have underestimated how important it is. Sobering moment, but I'll bring us back up, So I was called into a university recently for a football player who took his own life, quite frankly. And, people are puzzled because he was doing well. He had the grades to stay in school. He had the money to stay in school. But as we started sort of putting pieces together, I, as a consultant to the matter, really working with student affairs and their campus security and everything, we discovered traces of a person who did not feel like he mattered and belonged. So it's that important to people. By the same token, I've met students who, wonder, like the students we're talking today. You walk into a classroom, you don't know anyone, but before you know it, you find out someone's from Columbia, Maryland, like you are. You find out that someone has your same name. Even if they spell it differently, it's pronounced the same way. And it boosts your spirits. It increases your confidence, and that confidence can translate into going to class, engaging in learning, asking questions and not feeling worried about being judged, getting better grades, being retained, and graduating even on time. So, to understand that it's important is one thing. I think if you're nothing else, just not to underestimate its power in both directions. Thank you for that question.
All right, thank you so much. Wait, did we have one more question? Did you see somebody? Yes. We're committed to the short question format.
Middle of the room.
So I'm an out-of-state, my name's Molly, I'm in the class as well. I'm an out-of-state student, but I know there's a lot of in-state students here. And as a student ambassador here, try to kind of convince students to be excited about their own state school and why they chose to go here is kind of something I take a lot of pride in and trying to make sure students enjoy their time in college here. How do you suggest that students could pair with, like I know you're talking about the institutional commitment, but also the goal commitment. How do you kind of morale students to be excited about where they're going to school?
Yeah, I love that. And thanks for that question, Molly. So there are all sorts of things you can do to get excited about college. I mean, one is, I think the institution, and likely already do this, people get excited about mysterious kinds of things. Like I went to Wabash College, and Wabash is just full of tradition and history. It's like every single student ambassador who was with me on that campus when I was there was like, okay, don't step on that rock because you'll fail your final exam. And I'm hopping over rocks, and it's like, okay, don't move left or else your girlfriend's going to be ugly. Whatever it is, it's like all this stuff they make up. But it's a bit much at times, but it is kind of cool that you have this sort of tradition. And the tradition has secret handshakes, and at my own alma mater, UVA, there are secret societies. So I think there are lots of ways to build some mystery into the experience and excitement for students that, like, I ask students a lot of times in my research, what does it mean to be a roadie? What does it mean to be at URI? And students who can answer that question, it's like, oh no, if you're here, we know you're a student here because you know certain things about the place. You know certain things you should do, certain things you should not do. Those sort of codes of conducts and those traditions create that kind of connective tissue that you're talking about. I think the second is students play a role. I'm so glad you asked the question, Molly, because people often think about faculty, staff, and the administration doing things. Students, if you come into a room like this and you create forces like we were talking about today in class where people who are from out of state or people who are different can't be a part of your club, can't be a part of your group, can't sit at your row, or you yourself don't go and introduce yourself to someone and say, hey, Molly, my name is Terrell. Molly, where are you from? That when, as students, even as peers, we can create connections, we can find space where we can create community, we can create our own sort of customs and traditions. Students have an enormous amount of power and authority when it comes to fostering belonging for themselves. I'd say lastly that I've met a lot of students who say things like it's really terrifying to meet new people and to traverse new spaces. So my tips to students is this. One, remember you have a name. So introduce yourself. Hey, my name is. Second thing is listen to the person when they say what their name is so you can use it. By the way, if you use it within 90 seconds of getting it 3 times, it's yours forever. You got that? So right here in the red, tell me your name again. Jocelyn, you're number 1, Jocelyn. There was another Jocelyn over there in the class, right? So Jocelyn, if I'm like meeting you at a party, meeting you at an event, meeting you at orientation, I walk up and say, Jocelyn, oh my gosh, red is my favorite color, which is true. My name is Terrell. You say, my name is Jocelyn. I'm like, oh my gosh, Jocelyn, that's so great. Jocelyn, where are you from? Cumberland. Jocelyn, that's so amazing. Now I'm never going to forget your name. I've used it 3 times. Now you don't have to be awkward about it and be like, Jocelyn. Wait, is that 2 times or 3 times? You don't have to do that, right? More naturally, you use it, you introduce yourself. What you're doing is starting to create connections and the relationship consistency that I talked about. Now, I'm going to stop there. If you have other questions, join us in the reception. Give yourselves a hand. Thank you all for having me at the University of Rhode Island.
Thank you so much, folks. Thank you for joining us. Have a great night. Stay warm.